You know, our first story was about Stays in the Moment, who got the diagnosis of fetal alcohol syndrome. Now we're going to see a story about two raccoons, a brother and a sister, one with the diagnosis of fetal alcohol syndrome and one with the diagnosis of fetal alcohol-related conditions. In the past, we've also called this fetal alcohol effects, we've called it alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder, and many other things. The thing that they have in common with fetal alcohol syndrome is the damage to the brain, and that is why people really come to the clinics around the country, is to find out how they can deal with the behaviors of the children who are affected by alcohol in utero.
Listen closely as I tell you the story of two young raccoons, a brother and a sister, whose names were Best Day Ever and Little Mask. Despite several sad events that happened early in their lives, they were happy, curious, and playful. Their parents were curious too, as most raccoons are. But their curiosity got them into trouble when they found a garbage can with several cans of open beer. Licking the cans and liking what they tasted, Mother and Father Raccoon tipped the garbage can over so they could drink the liquid inside. Several times a week, Mother and Father Raccoon returned looking for more to drink. On a few occasions, a big round silver container holding beer was left next to the garbage can. Attached to it was a hose. The raccoons found that licking the hose was an easy way to drink the beer. What they did not know, however, was that Mother Raccoon was pregnant. All the time she was drinking the beer, so were her unborn babies. When the three baby raccoons were born, only two survived. The boy named Best Day Ever and his sister they called Little Mask. Because their parents had never had babies before, they did not recognize that Best Day Ever looked different from his sister and cousins. His body was small and thin, his nose short, his eyes small, and his tail was kinked at the end. The other thing his parents did not realize was that these two raccoons took longer to learn than others. The raccoon parents thought their babies were just fine and loved them just the way they were. Despite the birth of their babies, Mother and Father Raccoon were spending more and more time away from their nest, searching for beer and other alcohol, leaving Best Day Ever and Little Mask to forage for themselves. One morning, the raccoon parents left home to look for more alcohol, never to return. At first, Best Day Ever and Little Mask did not worry. They had grown accustomed to their parents' absence. As time went on, however, they became hungry and decided to look for food on their own. They caught a few grasshoppers, ate the goldfish out of the farmer's pond, and rummaged through the garbage dump. Feeling tired, Little Mask suggested they go home, but neither one of them could remember which way to go. Magpie, who had been watching the young raccoons for some time, flew down to see if he could help.
It looks like you're lost.
We know how to get home. We just don't remember which tree is ours.
Oh, I see. Well, tell me what your home looks like. I'll fly around and see if I can find it. In the meantime, I'm going to call Coyote. He will stay with you until I return.
Magpie screeched loudly several times, and Coyote walked quietly out of the trees and greeted the two young raccoons. Magpie flew off. A short time later, Magpie returned with a sad expression. Magpie called Coyote to his side and told him quietly what he had found. Coyote's ears drooped when he heard the news. Unaware of how their lives had just changed, the two little raccoons started to wander off. Magpie noticed and called after them.
Stop! Stay close. Coyote and I will take you where it is safe.
With Magpie leading the way and Coyote bringing up the rear, the odd quartet headed deep into the forest. The sun was setting and the hour was growing late. The two young raccoons were getting tired and hungry. Magpie brought them berries and bugs, but each time the bird did so, They all had to stop so the raccoons could wash their food in the nearby creek. They learned this routine from watching their parents, and neither one would eat until they had done so. Every now and then, the little raccoons would call out for their mother and father. Coyote and Magpie tried to comfort them, but with little lasting success. Finally, after what seemed like a very long time, they reached a clearing in the woods. There was a fire burning, and all the birds and animals and insects of the woodlands were gathered. Despite the very large crowd, it was very silent. Coyote walked slowly between Little Mask and Best Day Ever as he went to stand at the north of the circle of animals. All eyes were on Coyote as he began to speak.
I have brought to our healing circle 2 young raccoons who, due to alcohol, are now orphans. Magpie found them lost and scared. He flew to look for their parents and found them lying by the side of the road at the place where the humans throw their trash. I am sorry to say Mother and Father Raccoon had too much alcohol. They were drunk and wandered into the road and, well, we all know the rest.
Coyote bowed his head with sorrow and continued.
Now we have 2 young ones that still need the guidance and care of parents in our forest community. Are there any of you who would be willing to take on this task?
After a long pause, Grandfather and Grandmother Otter stepped forward.
We are older now.
Yes, and I can bear no more children, but my old maid and I have raised many. We would like to take on the care of these young ones.
Yes, yes. I have seen the young otters slide and play in the water. Let's go home with them.
With this, Little Mask pulled on her brother's paw, and they went over and stood next to Grandfather and Grandmother Otter.
Well...
Just then Mother Fox stepped up to Coyote and whispered in his ear. Coyote turned to where Father Fox sat with his special daughter. Coyote then looked closely at the 2 orphaned raccoons. His eyes widened in recognition as he studied Best Day Ever's face. Turning back to Mother Fox, he nodded.
Thank you all for coming to our circle tonight. We ask the Creator to guide you safely home. Will the otters, the fox family, bear, deer, and Dr. Raven please stay?
The other creatures left the healing circle, murmuring about the sad fate of Mother and Father Raccoon. As they left, Eagle flew silently overhead and landed on a rock next to Coyote, spreading her wings as if to welcome and protect all present.
Coyote, thank you for your help. I will thank Magpie tomorrow for his efforts. Now, I have asked you to stay and offer your aid and support to the otters. Dr. Raven, is it true what Mother Fox believes? That Best Day Ever and Little Mask have fetal alcohol syndrome?
Dr. Raven folded his wings and moved closer to the small raccoons. He carefully studied their faces and estimated their height and weight.
Let's see. Yes, dear Eagle, I believe it is true that Best Day Ever has fetal alcohol syndrome. I also suspect that Little Mask has fetal alcohol-related conditions based on her behavior. I would like Grandmother and Grandfather Otter, Bear, and the foxes to return to this healing circle at the time of the next full moon. Grandmother and Grandfather Otter, you know Deer, the head teacher at our forest school. She works with our children who need special help. Please take your children to her in the morning. She will be able to give you much of the information you will need. In the meantime, I hope you, Mother and Father Fox, and you, Bear, will share what you know to help our young orphaned ones.
Best Day Ever and Little Mask were very sleepy as Grandmother and Grandfather Otter led them home. Once they reached the creek, Grandmother Otter slid into the stream and swam to the small island where she and her mate lived.
Come, children, it is time to sleep.
We don't swim well. We can't get to the island.
Never mind. Go to sleep, Mother. I know you're very tired. I will make new beds here on shore and stay with our daughter and son tonight.
Grandfather Otter pulled moss and pine needles together and bedded down with his new children. Early next day, Grandmother and Grandfather Otter woke with their new children. It was time for them to get ready for school, but first they needed to eat and groom themselves.
Wow, fish for breakfast? Yum! This is the best!
Where are Mom and Dad? Why aren't they here? Where is our nest?
Little ones, don't you remember what was said last night? Your parents have passed to the spirit world. We will watch over you now.
Little Mask and Best Day Ever started to cry. They missed their parents and missed their home. The otters held them and patted them, drying their tears. After a while, Little Mask looked up.
What school?
Dear children, have you never been to school? That's where all young animals go to learn. Didn't your parents ever take you?
Our parents were gone a lot. We played and ate on our own. That's what we did all day.
Grandfather and Grandmother Otter could see the little ones would need time and extra help. They were not newborns, but many important lessons had not been learned. Still, from what they could see, Little Mask and Best Day Ever were eager to learn. After eating their fish, Grandfather Otter called his children to his side.
Come with me, kids. I will show you how to swim on our way to school.
Grandfather Otter jumped into the water, rolled over and beckoned the young raccoons. Little Mask and Best Day Ever jumped in, but both ended up coughing and very frightened. Grandfather Otter swam to the shore, pulling two small raccoons with his front paws. He waded into the shallow part of the stream and showed the younger ones how to work their front and rear paws in the water. He saw that, unlike himself, Little Mask and Best Day Ever swam with their heads out of the water. This made them slower, but Grandfather Otter decided this was better than drowning. When they arrived at school, they saw Deer, the teacher, and sitting at desks were young animals of all kinds.
Grandfather Otter, thank you for bringing me these special ones. This is a class for little ones who need extra support. You must be tired after last night and your travels this morning. I will meet with you in a few minutes. In the meantime, have a seat, and while you're waiting, take a look at this information about fetal alcohol syndrome and fetal alcohol-related conditions. You might find it helpful.
Grandfather Otter read the information that Deer had given him. It seemed there was so much he had to learn. Grandfather Otter watched his new daughter and son who were busy drawing. He noticed that Deer had several animals helping her in the classroom. Grandfather Otter became more concerned. If Deer needed so much help when she had the information, how would he and Grandmother Otter ever manage? Deer turned to Grandfather Otter, who looked overwhelmed.
Grandfather Otter, why don't you sit and watch how we work here in the classroom? And while you're watching, think about what you have read. Don't expect that you'll learn all of this in one day. You have raised many children, and you know what to do in many situations. But all of us have to make adjustments for our special ones. You'll find that it's not about trying harder, it's about taking a different approach. Take what you learn here and share it with your mate. You'll find many of these ideas useful at home. I'll see you at the next healing circle, along with many other parents.
At the end of the school day, Grandfather Otter gathered his papers and went over and took the paw of each small raccoon. The small raccoons ran down the path, pulling Grandfather Otter with them all the way home. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Grandfather Otter expressed some of his concerns.
Oh, Grandmother, I've been so confused today. Sometimes I think that having those beautiful children is the most wonderful gift, but I am so tired tonight. I'm just not sure I can give them all they will need.
My precious one, we will have help. Today I received a flyer telling of our raccoon's appointment with Dr. Raven. After the healing circle, there's a meeting for parents who are raising special children, like us. The foxes who attend these meetings and Dr. Raven will be coming for dinner soon. They and others will help us.
Grandmother Otter nuzzled her mate's cheek and fell asleep. Every day, Grandfather Otter took his children to school. He stayed with them, watching how Deer and her aides provided structure, consistency, and humor along with reading, spelling, math, and social skills training. Each night, he shared what he had learned with his mate. While they were away at school, Grandmother Otter made changes in the house. One day she had put labels and pictures on all the drawers and cabinets, telling what was inside. She had taped off areas in different colors, red for Little Mask and yellow for Best Day Ever. This way each child had a special place that was just for them. The day before the visit to the healing circle, the Fox family and Dr. Raven came for dinner. Both families sat down to a table laden with fruit, fish, and tasty insects. Each little raccoon had a water bowl by their plate to wash their food, as was their custom. After the children had eaten their fill, they and Grandfather Otter went down to the stream. He marked a safe area for the children and told them to play carefully and stay within the boundaries. Then he left to help with the cleanup. When all the chores were done, Mother and Father Fox spoke of the troubles they had and the changes they made to help their special daughter stays in the moment. They found that many of the tools used for her also helped their other two kits. The stories were soon interrupted when a loud yelp of laughter came from the stream. All the adults jumped up and ran to see what was going on. At the swimming hole where all the children were playing, Little Mask was on a tire, swinging out over the bank and on the verge of letting go. The other children were laughing and rolling on the ground.
Stop! Stop! Do not let go. Little Mask, you need to stop and get down now.
Little Mask slowed, then hopped off.
What was I doing wrong? You said that we could swim.
Little Mask, I told you to stay within the area I marked for you. Don't you remember? You could have been seriously hurt if you had let go over the grass instead of the water. You scared us.
But Grandfather, I didn't see any marks. I was showing how good I could swing. Aren't you proud of me?
Oh my, of course you don't know what my otter's marks are. You're a raccoon. I need to think better and show you things more clearly. Let's go in. Say goodnight to the foxes. We'll see them again tomorrow.
After saying goodbyes, the foxes and Dr. Raven slipped off into the forest. The others picked up their precious foster children and carried them into the house, tucking them in and telling them bedtime stories. The next morning dawned bright and beautiful. Little Mask and Best Day Ever were up before the sun and exploring. They ran in to wake the otters. Grandfather Otter followed the excited youngsters down to the stream. He stopped in surprise. Standing on the shore where Little Mask had nearly fallen the night before were Mouse, Beaver, and Elk, all smiling broadly in the sunlight.
We heard what happened last night, and we wanted to help, so I chewed through the rope. Elk took the tire away, and we put bramble bushes around for boundaries. Safe fun for your little ones.
Thank you so much. Let us know if there's some way we can return this gift of caring. Please excuse us. We journey to the healing circle today.
The Otter and Fox families began their journey. After a few hours, they reached the healing circle. Standing at the edge of the circle were Coyote and Dr. Raven. Dr. Raven smiled broadly and motioned to the otters and raccoons to enter the healing circle.
Welcome. Gathered here today are all the ones who have come to help you and your children. Some of the ones here you know, and I will introduce you to the rest. Let me tell you why they are important in this circle of healing and in your children's lives.
The first to enter was Owl, the psychologist. Owl's job was to help the otters understand how their children's brains might have been hurt by alcohol. Owl asked many questions about the otter's family life, the problems and the successes they had with their little ones, and the things they felt as parents that they did well. Owl's helper Rabbit came next. Rabbit's job was to test Little Mask and Best Day Ever to find their strengths and skills. She also measured what the young raccoons had learned so far in their lives. Next was Kingfisher. He listened to the way the little raccoons spoke. From their speech patterns, he could understand how they learned, how their brains worked, and what types of help they would need to understand their everyday world. Deer, the head teacher from the forest school, entered and smiled at the otters and the little raccoons. Next, Bear joined the circle. Bear herself had a teenage daughter who had fetal alcohol syndrome. Bear's job at the circle was to help parents feel at ease and help them gain services for their children. She also helped lead the parent support group. Squirrel came next. Her job was very important. It was to tell all the animals in the forest about fetal alcohol syndrome and how to prevent it from happening. Dr. Raven and his team worked closely with the otter raccoon family. After several hours of examining the two little raccoons, Dr. Raven and his team sat down with grandmother and grandfather otter to share what they had learned.
Well, you may have noticed that your children have different skills and strengths. One is bigger than the other. One is quicker to learn. That is because, although they are from the same litter, one of your precious children is more affected by the alcohol than the other. We do not know how this happens. However, both of your children are indeed affected by the alcohol their mother drank. Little Mask shows less of the facial features and growth deficiency, but she has many of the challenging behaviors seen in children who were exposed to alcohol while in the womb. We would say that she has fetal alcohol-related conditions. I'm sorry to say this means she has brain damage. Best Day Ever is smaller and has all of the physical attributes seen in children with fetal alcohol syndrome. Thank you for bringing your lovely children to us. Come again if you need anything.
Raven encouraged the otters to read the information given to them by the team and asked Bear to take them to the parent support group. Within a few minutes, the group led by Bear came to a small circle of stones arranged around a fire. Seated on the stones were many other parents and caregivers. Bear went to the north end of the circle. She stood quietly for a moment as welcomes flew around. Then she raised her paw and the circle became silent.
This circle first came together because we, as parents and caregivers to these special souls, felt so alone. We often doubted our skills as parents. We saw little hope and almost no understanding from the rest of the world. In this circle, we learned to laugh again and to give each other a sense of hope and the possibility of change for the better. There is no judgment here, only encouragement and care.
When the circle came to Mother Fox, she paused, then began.
I am here with my mate to tell you of our child stays in the moment. When we first came to Dr. Raven's clinic, we were frightened and confused. We often felt angry that our child had trouble learning and making her way in the world. Now, with the help of Dr. Raven and his staff, with the support of this circle, and with more understanding from the forest community, we're making a big difference in the life of our daughter. Today we see her behavior as a means of her trying to communicate with us. We're more patient with her and ourselves. We have learned that we are not alone. We've also learned that getting help as soon as you think there's something not working well with your child is better than waiting in fear. Early intervention has improved our chances of being successful. The most important things we now have are tools to help our daughter, but we know it will take everyone in the sacred circle of life pulling together to help her make her life better. Have hope, Grandmother and Grandfather Otter. When you get tired, bring Little Mask and Best Day Ever over to us. We can give respite care. Call on the ones in this circle. And don't worry, we'll be calling on you too.
With that, Mother Fox sat down and leaned over to hug her daughter and mate. Others rose and offered similar stories. Finally, the circle came back to Bear, who sat in silence for a moment. Then she stood up and looked around the circle.
Thank you all for sharing. We all have the same issues and dreams, fears and joys. If there are others you know who might benefit from Dr. Raven's clinic and our circle here, ask them to join us.
At the end of the night, as the journey home began, the moon beamed down, and all were filled with hope, love, and the promise of a better tomorrow for their special souls, their children.
You know, Julian, watching the video again, it really makes me realize how important it is for us to understand the difference between fetal alcohol syndrome and fetal alcohol-related conditions. Fetal alcohol syndrome is a certain set of physical characteristics that makes our children different from others. But the thing that they have in common with people who have fetal alcohol syndrome-related conditions is the brain damage. People rarely bring their kids into clinic because they have small eye slits. They bring them in because of their behaviors.
And I think it's really important for us all to remember, too, that fetal alcohol-related conditions is not a lesser or a less severe form of fetal alcohol syndrome. It only means that they don't have the physical characteristics, and oftentimes that makes it even more difficult for the parents and those children. Did you have a question?
How can alternate caregivers be better prepared, like the Otters, to care for children that are needing special attention?
Great question. As a foster parent, I think that there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration. First off, just like the Otters in this video, many of the caregivers out there are actually grandparents who are caring for their grandchildren now. And I also think that it's important for us to realize also that a lot of the alternative caregivers were or still are biological parents to their own children. And I think some of the most frustrating things for us as foster parents or adoptive parents or other caregivers oftentimes is that the things that worked with our own children, those interventions, those behavior plans, those strategies that worked with our own children aren't working with the children that are coming into our home that have alcohol-related conditions. And that gets very frustrating for us, it gets frustrating for the schools, it gets frustrating for the children. And so I think that one of the biggest things that we can do is to pursue any and all kinds of trainings that we can get, furthering our education, doing reading, anything like that, because the more that we can learn, the better advocates that we will be for these children. I also think that it's really important for us to adjust our expectations. And I know that in our home, when my husband and I first made the distinction that it wasn't so much that these children wouldn't do something, but that they couldn't do it, it made all the difference in the world then as to what we expected of them. And it made a difference in what we expected of ourselves. And, so we relaxed a little bit. We became more like their mom and dad rather than always stressing about 10 more minutes of homework or, that kind of thing. And when we adjust those expectations or we educate ourselves, I think that we realize that in our society here, there are some general premises that we operate on in our country. One of them is that by the time you're 18, you're well on the way to being independent. Not our kids, not the children with fetal alcohol effects. Most of them are at about half their chronological age. So at 18, we're talking about kids who are functionally, adaptively more like 8 or 9. They're not on the, they're not there to independence. Another premise that we have in our country is that if you do something wrong and we punish you, you're going to learn from your mistakes and you'll never do it again. That, too, is difficult or different for the children who have alcohol-related conditions because these kids don't internalize information, they don't generalize from one situation to another, and they have limited abilities with cause and effect. But the biggest thing I think that as parents or as caregivers, period, that if we think about it in the way that we operate our country, if we had an individual who had a physical disability that manifests itself in physical symptoms, like you have cerebral palsy, so you are in a wheelchair. Or you have problems with your retina, so you're blind. Or you have problems with your cochlea, so you're hearing impaired. As a society, generally, we then accept those individuals for who they are. And we work very, very hard at building programs around those individuals that support them. And we're not out there to try and change them. But when we have children who have physical disabilities like brain damage that manifest in behavioral problems, like oftentimes our children do, that have problems with organization, problems with judgment, problems with being impulsive or distractible, all of those things that bring the parents into our clinic with their babies, with their children. As a society, we don't oftentimes accept those individuals for who they are, inclusive of that disability. Instead we spend a lot of time not building those wheelchair ramps like we would for the young person in the wheelchair, or not giving them a FM system like we would if they were hearing impaired. But instead we set out to change the behavior because we believe then we're going to cure the child. And I think that's what we set ourselves up and we set the children up when we do those things.
And I think it's even more important than to get this education and training, because you then need to go to the school and educate the school. You may need to educate social workers. You may unfortunately be educating the juvenile justice system. Everything is touched by the lives of these children, and everyone needs that education.